are live. I'll wait a few seconds for people to join and have their pages refresh. But thank you all for making it to the end. We're here in our last final official session of the day. I can already see some people that are kind of popping into backstage.
Yeah.
So that is awesome. Hi, Ed. You're coming up next. We also have just a few sites that we can share on our end as well. But the goal for this next hour or so is really just to chat and continue to share more examples. So Jim and I have a few lined up that, school sites and just different ideas and things that really stick out to us that we want to feature and highlight. But please feel free to jump into the StreamYard link, which was linked in sessions, but we'll continue to link to it again in case you've missed it. I think it's also pinned. And just as a little housekeeping note, our StreamYard link can only support 10 people at a given time. So if there is, right now we have plenty of space, so don't feel like you can't join, but in the event that you click on the link and you're not able to get in there right away, it's probably because we have a line of people. So we'll kind of just play this by ear and see how it goes. And then this will also lead into kind of some final live Q&A and closing. So stay as long as you can and continue to engage. We're really excited for sharing some of these examples. So
yeah, I agree.
Do we want to, all right, let's see. I obviously have my screens ready to go, but maybe we pull in Ed, if you want to jump in right off the bat here.
I like that idea. Absolutely.
You were live, man.
Hi, Ed.
Okay, I was not quite ready yet, but I will get ready real quick.
That's all right.
I was just going to show some of the stuff that we're doing with Pressbooks at SUNY Oneonta. Again, with one of the themes of the day, where we're located has kind of determined what we're working on. And so I was heavily involved with the OER initiative at my institution before we had a domains initiative. So many of the things that we are making are things that are openly licensed. Pressbooks is one of the tools we use for that. It's not the only tool we use for that. And so I'm going to just share my screen and show one of my current projects that I'm working on. And we've got quite a few Pressbooks that have been made in the last couple of years. What you're looking at right now is a Latin American civilization book that a faculty member created as the sole author. We also have a very strong Cooperstown graduate program that does museum studies. This is an interesting project. They have an agreement with the Little Falls Historical Society where they do a project for them every year. And one of the things that they decided to do this year was a book on the industrialization of Little Falls, and that was their class project. So a pretty good example of open pedagogy and just the idea that they already wanted a book to be the final output really just made Pressbooks a strong tool and a strong choice for doing that. One of the things that we had done at my school was to create a community site we called the Pandemic Diaries Project. And we invited our entire college community to post throughout their pandemic experience, just little diary entries, just following the idea of a mass observation project, that there were things that would be good to keep and document as we went through. And this was created originally as a nonlinear resource. So that was really meant to be a web page. It was really a blog roll for the community. But over time, we started to realize that some of the things that we might want to archive in a little bit of a different way. And so because this was built on a WordPress site and Pressbooks is also built on WordPress, we were able to do an import and start to bring these over into a Pressbooks. That's one of my current projects. And one of the things that I'm really interested in this project is, as an OER advocate, I'm always trying to get OER enthusiasts to think about the traditional sources of legitimacy and to engage with those people. And so we actually are going to publish this as an open access book with our university press. And that's really what my next piece of work is because the university press was able to share with me They're house style. And this will be my first child theme that I will be making for Pressbooks. And that's a lot of fun. Pressbooks has a lot in its original design that helps make this a little bit easier for me. They have a core set of values that they use as default, and then we really only have to override the ones that we need to, because their defaults make us pretty sensible, if not a little bit boring book. But then if we choose, we can start to say, okay, here's where I want to make changes, and I could work with that house style that they shared with me and start to override those in the SCSS, which then get pulled into the EPUB, the prints, and the web style sheets, because we have a different style sheet generated for each one of the different outputs in Pressbooks, but we only have to modify them here, and then these get pulled into the final spreadsheets using that SCSS structure. So that's been a lot of fun for me, and I know that there was a lot of interest in Pressbooks as we were introducing each other and as we were talking about it. Just wanted to share that.
Well, it's interesting, Ed, because one of the things I promised you, and it's still a list in my Asana to-do list, is a one-click installer for Pressbooks in Reclaim Cloud. And there are some tricks there, so that's actually something we're still working towards. But like, you make a really good case. You're running it on SUNY Create, and folks do use Pressbooks in tandem with their domain of one's own, and that's great. But having a kind of space where you can quickly up and run and it be independent is something we're trying to do. Obviously, Pressbooks does their own service better than us, but like, if that's something you want to experiment with, that's something we're working towards. So we haven't forgotten you. And the fact that you're coming up with a Pressbooks theme is pretty cool.
We're trying anyway. I could talk about Pressbooks all day, but one of the things that is a little bit different between the default setup in the domain of one's own and when Pressbooks hosts it for us is the accessibility of the Pressbooks and the accessibility of the alternate formats. A lot of people go with the completely open source MPDF plugin to generate their PDFs. And, when you use that prints plugin, well, that's not a plugin. It's an installed dependency on the server. You get a much better export, both better looking. It follows your theme styling so that your book that you output also matches what you see on the website. And then also the MathJax, which has always been my interest in getting that onto the domain of one's own server.
Exactly. And you brought
by any
that
means
up.
Necessary.
Yeah, and you've been a really good kind of ambassador of that and getting that stuff up there and knowing the difference. So that has not fallen off my to-do list, but hopefully this summer when I kind of get done running conferences with Lauren, we'll actually get back to that. So thank you so much for sharing with us today.
Thank you,
That's
Ed.
awesome. Now, I have the distinct pleasure, and this is actually, I kind of like it because it's not necessarily Reclaim hosting specific or domain of one's own specific at all, but it's related in that they're very cool data tools that Lee Skallerup is going to share with us around a project called the Data Sitters Club. And I messed up Quinn's name the first time, so forgive me for that, but save me, Lee.
It's Quinn Dombrowski. Yes. So I'm really excited to talk about this. Quinn can do it more justice, and she is Quinyana. I will get her Twitter handle in just a second. As you can tell, I'm totally prepared to talk about this because this was totally something I was going to do. Anyway, so the Data Sitters Club is a group of feminist, digital humanists and pedagogues who got together over our Gen X and early millennial love of the classic YA series, The Babysitters Club. So those of you who might not know, in the mid to 80s, all the way to the mid 90s, I think maybe even the late 90s, there's an entire series of books called The Babysitters Club, and it was all based on 5s, then 6, then 7, and then one boy, girls who got together in order to create a local neighborhood babysitters club so parents in the area could all come and call one place for babysitters. And of course, there are misadventures in every single book, either with the kids that they're babysitting or the travels they do. And they had babysitter club mysteries, and there's hundreds and hundreds of these. And there's a little sisters category, and there's mega vacation issues. Anyways, it is this whole ecosystem of books that were ghost written. We have the literal Babysitters Club book Bible, which is the unofficial guide to everything Babysitters Club. And so we're all digital humanists as well. And we wanted to think about, in some way, shape, or form, and we wanted to think about how can we make digital humanities more accessible and in a certain way more fun to be able to do it. And so we do these tutorials called Data Club books, and we have our volumes and series just like there. And here you have our book cover, the fun and colloquial guide to DH computational text analysis, which is basically what our project is, our larger project is. What's interesting though is, and I just want to even just talk about the site generally, is that this site is hosted on GitHub. And it is all flat HTML. We started off using a template in Jekyll, and then we went into, these are now Jupyter notebooks. So we're doing that. That is above my pay grade when it comes to the coding. That's other people who take care of the sites. But that is how we are running the Data Sitter Club. So in our group about promoting domain of one's own and domains and moving past WordPress, certainly there's no reason why this couldn't be hosted on your domain, right? It's just flat HTML. You can upload it using FTP. It just so happens we're using GitHub as a free, low cost, because that's the other thing that we're trying to do, is show kind of freer or low cost ways that people can do digital humanities and have access to these kinds of things. Because often there feels like a barrier to entry. And while a lot of schools do domains, not all of them do, but you can do stuff on GitHub. You can host a site on GitHub in flat HTML.
I really like, one of the cool things, I think the aesthetic, and Shannon brought it up in the Discord,
yeah, I saw that.
It's amazing. And the idea that you've linked it to this thing, and I mean, you know this, Lee, but I actually have right here the Italian version of the Babysitters Club that actually has, and if you see here, it says 80 tattoos, and it's in mint condition. So even if it's from the 80s, all the tattoos are there. And so I dig it. My daughter and son have been already looking through it. It came this morning, but we won't ruin it. And you tell me what you need to do with it. I am your emissary.
It's gonna get ruined. It's gonna get ruined because we're gonna scan it. We're going to scan it. We are going to OCR it. And then we are going to, how I got involved with the Data Sitters Club is actually, as my specialist, my academic training before all of this was actually in Canadian and Quebecois literature, and specifically translations from English to French and French to English. And while they were going through it, because they have the English language books, but then they were finding translations in different publications. And this is a ripe field for text analysis and text comparison. So, and what they're trying to do as well is some of the books they're trying to figure out using, oh gosh, I'm going to muck this up, but we did, one of the books is about seeing how all the different ghostwriters, what kinds of styles they had. Right? Topic modeling. There we go. Using topic modeling in that sort of way. And I was brought in because we found that there were actually four different French translations of the Babysitters Club book. There was a Quebecois version that was done almost at the same time. There was a Belgian version done almost at the same time as the publications were coming out. Then there was a later French version. And then there was an even later French version that used more of a French vernacular rather than the French high literary style, which was much more involved. And so, yeah.
So Antonella asked me, I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, Lee. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Please go.
No, I was going to say, one of the reasons we wanted that particular book that we got you is that we fell down, there's lots of rabbit holes, right? Yes. And so junk food. So we were doing we got interested is what's a way into these translations, right? What's a way to make these comparison of translations accessible? We found somebody in Belgium who does translation too. And so we've been working on like looking at really those cultural differences. And we honed in on food, and we thought, how are we translating food? Because especially the Babysitters Club, sorry, I'm nerding out, guys. I'm going to go on and on.
We'll pull you when we need
Babysitters
to.
Club books in English in America are very brand driven. So all the junk food is branded. It's Twinkies, it's M&Ms, it's Doritos, it is Twizzlers, it is like all the brands. And so we wanted to know, well, that's a good way to look at it. How are the brands translated?
Yeah.
So that led us down the rabbit hole of food. And so Quinn has text aligned everything. And in terms of the different translations. And then we were like, how are they being translated now that we have these? How are they being translated in other languages?
It's brilliant.
And that book with Dawn that you held up is her going back to California, and her character trait is that she's originally from California, and this is, don't forget, in the 80s. Her family is into health food, so they eat weird foods, right? And then it's seeing how all of those California quote unquote health foods have been translated into the various cultures and language. And then French, they really struggled. And then Quinn was like, how is it translating into other languages? And so now we're down the rabbit hole of being on lots of foreign language eBays and used booksellers to like,
that's so cool.
Buy all of it. And there's Finnish
the Italians still struggle.
Yeah,
with American junk food.
Yeah. Well, this isn't junk food. This is health food, right? This is all like
that's
the
cool.
80s bean sprouts and that kind of stuff.
It's really cool because I was watching Quinn when she was announcing this project for doing different language digital humanities early on, I think the beginning of last semester. But the cool thing is, kind of highlight some of the work Tim Sherratt's doing, you all are doing, like you're using Voyant, you're using Jupyter Notebooks. And that kind of workbench of different digital tools for textual analysis and data analysis is part of what Reclaim Cloud hopefully provides. You can run Jupyter Notebooks. You can run, Voyant. You don't need, obviously, Reclaim Cloud for that. But it's cool because the two really do come together. And the work you all are doing is it's inspiring because, like you said, it's fun.
Yeah.
And it has a great kind of corollary to a cultural throwback in the 80s and 90s, but also very focused on what it means to kind of think through and work with data as part of a digital humanist. So it's a brilliant project, and thank you for sharing it. It's awesome.
Yeah. One of the other things we wanted to show too, and then I'll shut up about it, is that it's literature that most people don't consider literature, and most of the time aren't taken seriously. This is a YA series geared towards young girls, right?
Yeah.
And teenagers, early teenagers. And that is culture that is heavily, heavily marginalized, right? And so here we are taking high DH methodologies, right? Textual analysis, all of these kinds of things, and applying them to what a lot of people would consider being the most trivial form of literature. And they would put literature in scare quotes. And so there's something really about this that we hope is inspirational, that shows like, it's fun. You can tell I'm beaming talking about this.
Yeah,
but like
it's awesome.
I'm just really proud that we were able to do this work and sort of show, look, this isn't just for capital L literature, right? Mm-hmm. This can be for any kind of writing, and you can learn all of these skills and apply them to something that is meaningful and matters to you, and learn things from it. Right.
Hey,
it's not just it's not a monoculture. There's lots of stuff.
I'll tell you, one of the things I'd love to do a follow-up with, and maybe we will for Reclaim today, is maybe having you and Quinn and other folks from the Data Sitters Club talk about how you're using those tools to do that. Because that's a really cool, larger discussion of a really cool project. So you know what? We'll follow back up with you because that's pretty exciting. Thanks for sharing.
You'll have to make it a 3-part series because we will talk your ears off about it.
Hey, that's awesome. I need the content. Yeah, like and subscribe. I need that content. Hi, Marie.
Hello, Marie.
Hi.
Thank you
Georgetown
for being so
representing.
willing to share next.
Yeah, so we have this project that we worked on with a faculty member in the government department, free speech project. Can you see my screen? Is that, okay, there you go. So this is a WordPress, well, so backing up a little bit about the project. So his research area basically is tracking free speech issues across the country. Most of it is violations, but there are sort of just also sort of incidents of, is this a violation or not kind of question. So the cool thing about this project is it's a WordPress site, but we have this free speech tracker where you'll see when it loads. So we used Mapbox and then sort of overlaid the incidence itself on the map. So if I zoom in here, you can sort of see all the incidents on the East Coast, sort of zoom into the area. And then now this is connected to a post in WordPress. So then you're able to go sort of get details on the incident itself. So that's one aspect of it. So the overarching sort of theme was also, how do we teach this in a classroom, right? So you have curriculum resources, and as you can see, there's outcome for the case, for the incident itself. And then if you go to the curriculum resources, you'll see the themes. But let me back up a little bit here. So the curriculum resources and these themes are kind of connected. If I click on foreign policy, you'll sort of get a little bit of information on the context here. And then again, sort of filtered down on incidents around this particular thing. So, just a very nice example of collaboration between CNDLS and sort of the research that the professor and his research team did. And it was a very nice space to be able to use domains because obviously, first of all, WordPress, easy to do that. This is all completely custom development. So it was a, kind of externally funded. Actually, no, there was a funding. So there was a little bit of funding from the Carnegie Foundation and CNDLS and some funding from the president's office to really be able to put some effort behind this. Now, this is not typically what we're able to do with every faculty member and the research project, but when you're able to sort of really dedicate some time, resources, this is the kind of work that domains this really, lends itself well to, because you're spending less time on which server, where do I host the database, and just a lot of time spent on thinking through the problem. What are the right plugins? How do we customize that? So just a sort of quick short.
This is
an amazing site. Like, this is the first time I'm seeing it. This is a complete surprise. So go ahead there.
I was going to say, I just have to applaud you all at Georgetown for always being on the cusp and staying relevant in these conversations that are sometimes hard to have. I go back to the slavery.georgetown site all the time, which is, I think running WordPress and Omeka. And so the fact that you all are still continuing to be in these conversations now around police brutality and free speech, and it's very powerful. So thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah. And I think that's also the power of being able to be in a teaching and learning center where we can engage in these different conversations. Well, in some cases, this might be sort of a siloed, either IT department or only library, that kind of focus, where in this case, we were able to really pull in partners across the board.
I wonder, and I'm going to geek out a little bit here, because I love that you have newsletter, podcasts. Obviously you're doing stuff with data where you have various points that are linking to posts. Like, can you give us even a broad idea of how this was built, or like what was the conception around the design? Because it really is elegant, and I would never know looking at it was a WordPress site, if it even is, and how it was done.
Yeah. So this is, as I said, fully custom built, leveraging Gutenberg. We found a helpful template. It's been a year since I touched the code, but we used, I think, Ghost template maybe to also customize the editing interface, so that as their team now enters the projects, they can actually use, if you go to each tracker, as you see, there's different sort of buckets. So they always only can use this when they're entering a post. So each of the entry itself is a post, and then we're using categories for the themes. And then with Mapbox, we're integrating with Google Maps, but Google Maps sort of overlay is not that great. We still use the OpenStreetMap for the image itself, and then Mapbox to be able to like zoom in, and then leveraging Google API, Google Map API, to then pull in the data. I think those are sort of the big picture items. I'm trying to think of anything else that might be relevant here. Oh, we
really
did use
elegant.
I think we also used ACF to add additional sort of fields, but I can't remember if it was a page or a post, but we did use ACF as well.
Yeah, ACF gets talked about a lot, and I know we're using it actually for the headless WordPress site that's running the video kind of site, that like thing that we're playing with. So Tom Woodward was working with that to kind of pull that data over, but it's kind of static HTML. And I'm always interested to see how some of that stuff is built. I guess that's kind of the ed tech and be like, also like, podcasting has taken off. I wonder if folks out there, like how they're using, or if they're using, fairly homegrown solutions to help faculty, students, whoever, kind of, share some of the stuff like the podcast associated with this. Like, I love to hear those DIY solutions. They're awesome.
Is ACF a plugin?
It is.
Yeah.
Okay. I Googled ACF and it came up with American Culinary Federation. So I need to do my research on that one.
I mean, food is always great, right?
Yeah. Cutting up your domain, right? Like we could do a whole chef.
That's drowning.
That's what they do with like the H5P, which I think folks have. Is that right? H5P or HP5?
Yeah.
Like Alan Levine and the folks at British Columbia, I think at BC campus, are doing a whole metaphor around the kitchen and playing with that. And a cool thing that they did, and I'm kind of getting far afield, so forgive me, is that they built a H5P sharing repository through Drupal. And so like the idea there is like there's a Drupal instance. If you can clone that, you could also create a node of sharing your various H5Ps used around campus. And I think Ed Beck was talking about that in a separate conversation we had. But so much cool stuff possible as you demonstrate beautifully, Marie. It's always a pleasure to hear and see the work you all are doing.
Thank you. And thank you for sharing the H5P example too, because our online team is exploring H5P for
actually Clint Lalonde, who's I'll actually find the tweet and I'll put it in Discord. He shared some of the stuff they're doing, and like they're getting a repository together so folks can freely share H5P examples. So I'll put there, and then Alan Levine is running those sessions where it's like H5P in the kitchen, and it's just Canadians being Canadian and doing cool stuff up there. So I will definitely share that out.
Awesome.
Thank you, Marie.
Thank you both.
Thanks, Marie.
Yeah, I was just sitting here thinking, the OER domains help support page that was built on an H5P template. I think there's a lot of examples for those.
Was it really?
Yeah.
I had no idea. That's so cool.
Let me share that. I need to.
Oh, am I thinking? Is that it? Yeah. You did that with H5P?
Yeah. So we're kind of taking this full circle now, because how this workshop delivery is happening started from, when we were thinking about it for the OER by Domains conference that we put on in April. And so with that, I created a help page, just kind of taking folks through how we were going to be delivering the conference, because it was a little more intense with 2 simultaneous tracks. For this workshop, we've obviously simplified things a bit into one track each day. And so the need for a help page wasn't as dire, but yeah, this is built off of a template that I used for that, and then, each page.
That's so, I didn't realize that is so cool. And guess what? Speaking of H5P, We have Ed Beck,
Yes,
and
he's
I
back.
think he might have it. Guess who's back? Ed is back. Shady's back.
Hello, Ed. Do you need us to give you a second?
No, you
He's
just
like,
can put me right on right away.
You're live, Ed. Put away the bong and get ready.
We could also give you a minute if you want us to go through some more examples on our end, because I've got plenty on my side. So
Well, I was just going to pull up the H5P stuff that you guys were talking about, especially eCampus Ontario's, and then how I've started to try to replicate that using our domain of one zone infrastructure.
That was just me making sure you're still listening, Ed. That's why I did it. And if you didn't get in here, I'd be like, Ed left. He doesn't care about us. He took off. All right, Ed, I want to hear you talk about that. You know, I've been dying to hear you go on. And when Clint shared the H5P repository, which thank you, Tim and Tom, for sharing in the Discord chat, I see this stuff is all related, and like sharing resources kind of is for me, the theme of this conference. So I'd love to hear you say more about it, Ed, or this workshop or this roadshow, whatever it is.
So the H5P is a free open source project that can be integrated into a WordPress site, into a Drupal site, into a Moodle site. Those are the three main hosts that you can then use H5P inside of. And the folks at eCampus Ontario, who are just brilliant, said, you know what, the way Drupal is set up, with Drupal being more of a database than really WordPress is, and working more like a database, it would really make sense for us to have build an H5P hub off of Drupal instead of like WordPress or Pressbooks. They were seeing situations where faculty members would sign up for an entire website on their WordPress multi-sites, whether that was a Pressbooks or just a regular WordPress multi-site, just to get access to H5P. So it was taking up more of their time and attention and really not really using the resource to its full ability when people really just wanted the ability to come in and be able to create these, H5P interactives. So what they said was, we need to build something that's a little bit quicker, that we can just let people log in, build an H5P activity, and then let that be the hub. Because really, once it's built in H5P once, you can reuse it and put it in an iframe and put it across several different sites, just as an iframe. But you just need a home base first. And looking at that, what was really interesting is, as I was looking at how they built this H5P studio, which has become a massive resource, is it had no core hacks. They didn't devote a developer to do this. They just really were using Drupal expertly. And so we had the idea in SUNY, well, we can do that. It's not that difficult to set up a Drupal and create a new custom content type and let everyone have access to only that custom content type to create that catalog that they're making it. But we're not Drupal people. We grew up in the domains of one's own, and a lot of us would go right to WordPress first. And so we found ourselves, we were in over our heads quite a bit. But what's so cool about Drupal is they can synchronize all your settings from one site to another with a pretty simple export file. And so, I've had several meetings with the team at eCampus Ontario about sharing their settings, sharing their default settings, so that I could use and other people could replicate what they've done so expertly and benefit. And they're sharing people, so they're very interested in this, but they have to figure out a little bit about whether it meets all their goals. Sure, we could use H5P in other locations, but the simplicity of this catalog that both sets it up as a place to share, but also has the licensing information and the author information is really what we were into.
I'm going to unmute my mic so I can actually talk. So Ed, let me ask you this. So you talked about doing that with Drupal based on eCampus Ontario, because I want to get the kind of connection right. And so this is basically something that you can federate. So like, is eCampus Ontario able to share that with the stuff that Clint Lalonde's doing at BC campus? Can you all at Oneonta or SUNY more generally jump in there? And so is that kind of, I know Moodle was trying to build this whole idea of like the open OER resource, but like this sounds like that, but actually useful.
So what I just showed is really a hub for our community. That would be like, oh, I create one for SUNY and I restrict logins to my suny.edu email addresses, and anyone from SUNY can create there. But what's really nice about H5P is they've created a .h5p file extension. And so if I went back and shared my screen again, which I'm not going to do, but in the bottom left-hand corner of each of the interactives, it says share. And if you click on that, you could download that H5P file and upload it to your own server, or there are even desktop applications that run H5P and use that same file as the basis point of your jumping off. And that can be toggled either on or off. And then they are also building a federated H5P network in addition to what I showed, where you can share. You need to have one home base. And that's what we were finding is we needed a home base in SUNY that wasn't people building their own, requesting an entire Pressbooks book just so that they could create 5 H5P interactives. Exactly. We needed a different entry point because people were asking and wanting that H5P.
So it sounds like from the Discord comments, and I'll let you jump back in there, Tom did something similar with Gravity Forms at Middlebury around H5P. So I would love, this is a new world to me. I have to say, I have been out of the ed tech on the ground game for a while, but I know I've been watching and seeing so many cool people do cool stuff. So I appreciate you bringing this to our attention and sharing it. And I think Lee is back too. So it's like sometimes they come back. And she has, I think, examples to share around H5P. Lee, am I right with that?
Yes. Yes, she is back.
Actually, I am back, and it's not H5P, but it's something that I'm sure Tom will show wonderful things. His gourmet sausages versus the hot dogs. I still remember his talk from the last one. But exactly. Another thing, the last domains. But another thing that came up at the last domains conference, the one in Oklahoma, was people talking about the degradation of databases. And we were talking about it here, is that how do we take dynamic websites and turn them into flat, more archivable websites? And that's something that part of the digital humanities community is actually really concerned with as well. And it's created this whole movement within digital humanities, or this sub-movement, I guess, called minimal computing. And so what they're thinking, their idea behind it is, how can we create more sustainable digital platforms that require less bandwidth, both to access in terms of being able to use them, not as many resources, doesn't need a lot of funding. You might need to learn a little bit of coding, but not necessarily need an entire Mellon grant to be able to fund something. And then also more sustainable on the user end, where it takes up less bandwidth. It is in flat HTML. It is easier to archive. The database doesn't degrade. It doesn't need as much upkeep. And so my colleague, Alex Gill, or I'm pronouncing his last name wrong, Gill, it's Gil. He is Elotrolex on Twitter. He works at Columbia Libraries as one of their digital librarians and digital humanists. And some of the developers have developed this platform called Wax. And what Wax is a flat HTML exhibit. So it's an alternative to Omeka, where you can have you'll have a collection, you'll have keys, you'll have images, but it's all built in flat HTML using Jekyll. And their template called Wax. And so if you can create a spreadsheet and a folder of images, and can get through the command line, then you can use something like Wax. And it's really, really fantastic in terms of learning a little bit of code, learning a little bit of HTML, learning a little bit of CSS, but also just fantastic when you think about issues of social justice, accessibility, bandwidth. This is all very, very low bandwidth on all the ends. And so it's just this, and it could be hosted on domains. Like, that's the thing. He shows how to host it again on GitHub, but this is something that can, through FTP, be easily hosted on a subdomain. Now, I was hoping to have one to show, but I've been busy.
That is actually really cool. And I actually have seen, I follow him as well, ElectroAlex on Twitter, and I have seen him talking about this as an alternative to stuff like Omeka, which may be a little bit more overhead with the database. And we know very well, like, version updates, anything that runs a database over time becomes your enemy with plugins and themes. So, and I love the whole idea of the mini comp, or this kind of, almost, there was another person who wrote a manifesto about small computing and the idea of trying to keep resources really limited and tight. And this is an excellent example. And it really does point to the fact that there's so many projects out there. And we do get into the rut of like WordPress, Omeka. And I love WordPress. I made a career in WordPress, so I'm not going to talk smack on it. But like, there's more in heaven and earth, right, than we could imagine in our kind of like web-based mentality. So I do think that like showing examples like that and getting people excited about alternatives, or even just to experiment, is the name of the game. And that's how we got into domains to begin with. So that's awesome, Lee. Thank you.
That's why I thought you might like it. I thought other people might like it, but like, just even if I'll share the link to it, but even just reading up about minimal computing as we talk about digital literacy and fluency, this is another entry point to it, to get us to think more critically about the technology we use.
Exactly. I went black in honor of mini computing. Minimal computing, sorry.
And next up, I believe we have Tim Clark joining us. Thank you for coming. Let me get your screen up here. I think you're on mute, Tim.
Tim, if you don't talk about Azuracast and radio, I don't know what I'll do. I'm kidding.
Yeah, not this time, but I guess it's in the spirit of that. As you said, there's more to the universe than WordPress. I just wanted, and it's come up a couple times about self-hosting or running your own sorts of applications and getting out of the data extraction side of things for services. I just wanted to point out a couple of super fast things that I've done on my own domain. And I show students this sometimes as examples of what one can do beyond just sort of like working around within the sort of confines of an assignment. So on my own sort of domain, I installed, you can see over here, I've got something called Links. I'm using an open source application called Charlie. Now, it's not in the Installatron. I grabbed it off of GitHub. But the installer is super simple. You basically just download the code, you uninstall it, and you type in the URL to the administration, and it spins up a database. And then all of a sudden, what you have is a bookmarking tool, a link repository. But it's a link repository with a little, a few more jets, because you can get tag clouds, which is kind of cool, and it gives you sort of a daily rundown of all of the things that you've bookmarked. There's a little bookmarklet that you can drag right into your bookmark bar. And so it lives with me, and it's something that I, don't use a service for. If I need to export it and move it, I can do that. It's super easy. I also have something that I use as my RSS reader. So here, let me see if I can get back here real quick. Called Feeds, and this is actually an application called Miniflux, which again I found out. It's not in the installer, but I pulled it in using the file manager basically, and I just installed it on my domain, and now you can see like all of the different blogs that I follow, because people still blog. They're all right here, and I can even push these to something on my phone so that if I'm waiting in line or whatever, I can read all of the blog posts that I need to catch up on.
I'm glad that you only subscribe to Tom and I.
No, there's more. There's more in there. And then the last one, this actually is in the installer. It's called URLs. It's just a URL shortener so that you're not giving your data to Bitly or any of those other sorts of services. In fact, I went out and bought my own domain that matches my Twitter handle. And once you've got that sort of living on your domain as an add-on domain, you can install URLs right from the Installatron, link it to your own custom domain name, and all of your shortened URLs from that point forward will sort of resolve through that. So this is another sort of thing that you can do if you're sensitive to sort of notions of surveillance capitalism and sort of feeding that whole machine, which I'm sure many of us are. This is something you can do in half an afternoon on a weekend. You can get your own URL shortener set up. If you use it in class or whatever, if you put it in your slides, it's just something that you can do, and it's right there already.
That's awesome.
And you really highlight the power of a domain, right? Like it is a bunch of different things, right? I mean, we can associate it with the website. And I mean, I'm a big fan of that. Like another blog, I'm a huge fan of that, but also a feed reader, right? A place to kind of own your own shortened links, a place to kind of own your own bookmarks. And own is always a tricky word, but the idea of like, it's truly something where you can kind of manage the various aspects of your digital identity, even if you do use the various social media platforms. But having some space for your own was always the push for us at Mary Washington. And Tim, I love that you still push hard on that too, was like, we want our students to think about the various dimensions of their data and its value to them rather than the huge, social networks that in some ways have kind of, I want to say, shut down some conversation beyond the decentralized web. And I think reclaiming that, I said it, might be of value. So,
well, I thought you were going to go into the domains as the house metaphor, and I was going to.
Do you want me to?
2 days.
I can do that, but I'll let Tom talk and I'll stop.
Thank you, Tim.
Sure.
All right. I'm going to show you something maybe that will be cool or interesting for somebody, maybe. But the idea is like a lot of you probably do work in either Slack or let's say Mattermost, because I've done integrations with Mattermost too. But there's easy ways to get data in here. Say like you can tie a Gravity form to submit into a Slack channel. And that can be really useful because everybody can see that if something gets claimed kind of in real time. It's a lot easier than managing an email. But what we came into here was the idea that we wanted to get data out. So since we were posting a lot of cool or interesting things in Slack, but not necessarily on our site, the question became, could we take Slack and tie it into WordPress? And because you can use the Slack API in some particular ways, we can do that. So I click on the button attached to some sort of post. It's going to grab the title. It's going to grab a chunk of the commenting and some of the auto-created, like kind of unfurled URL. It does it in HTML, which kind of sucks, but I haven't figured out a way to make a WYSIWYG editor in here. But in any case, you could change this, add some pieces. So I'll just write that, little extra O's, and then post it. And what this little thing tells me is, hey, that was successful. I'm a champion. Super. And when I go to a WordPress site like this one, I'll refresh it. And there we go.
Ooh,
yeah. And so it's just another example of how you can start to like knit these things together. And just increase your efficiency in different ways. And I'll show you one other kind of specific example. You can also do fancier stuff like this. What this is going to do is pop up a modal, and it's going to let me choose a particular course, let's say, and I can do an update right here from Slack. I can say neat things are happening. Oh no, and stuff's on fire. And then I submit it. And this is going to be, another thing. It's letting me know what happened. And then you see how this just incremented to 2. And what we've got here is these updates that are attached to a WordPress custom post that have a particular setup. And, so I just show it because when you start to talk about scaling support or trying to figure out workflows, like, to me, that's the kind of stuff you start thinking through. And it's the kind of stuff that can make things happen a lot faster, or can build sense of community, or can do X or Y or Z. It's just a matter of like keeping your actions in places that you can control and that you can alter and that you can knit together.
And it doesn't get lost. I mean, one of the biggest issues, having worked in Slack for many a year now, is Slack's a stream, right? And it gets lost, whereas you're pushing it out of the stream into a very targeted site for, say, the various, instructional designers or technologists who are working with faculty, and you want a sense of how's it going? Like, who's working with you? Are there issues? Like, sharing what's going on across that domain is gigantic. And we use Slack extensively, but I find once I'm out of that stream, Slack is a terrible archiving tool like Twitter or something else.
Well, it's just the thing that I think is cool about a domain of one's own, or any of this stuff, is that your tools are malleable. And like that's this idea of the dashboard too. cPanel and WHCMS is going to give us whatever they give us, but we don't have to stop there. And I think that's the beautiful thing. It's like iterate, design, mess with stuff, build these bridges, and use different places, for where they do things well. So that's a little something maybe.
Yeah, we have, use Slack for Reclaim hosting internally, and I'm focused a lot on bringing notifications in, because that is our centralized hub for where our team watches the happenings at Reclaim. And so everything comes into that single space, so we're not checking multiple things.
Right.
So that's how it's been helpful for us, but I like that you're also focused on pulling content from Slack and bringing it out. What was that tool that you just used to give the status reports? What was that in Slack?
Oh, I just made it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Where is it? Where does it live?
Where do you live?
It's just a little node app. So they have like Slack's SDK for that in JavaScript. I think it's called Bolt. And like just one day, I decided to try and use it, and I screwed up a lot for a while, but now it's not too bad. And I blogged at least the first one. I haven't blogged the second one yet, but I have the other thing. I'll throw the link in there for anybody who cares about it.
Oh, it's slick.
I could talk about Slack integrations all day long.
Exactly. You've been doing a lot of them through Zapier and other things, and those have worked amazing. Just like getting a common StreamYard password, because StreamYard only sends a code. So we have it come into a StreamYard Slack. And so in that regard, it's great for us having access. But in some ways, being able to filter and send some of the stuff we say in Slack or do in Slack to its own separate site would be amazing, because I feel like a lot is lost or will be lost, especially when there's a point where we're not going to want to pay Slack, right? Like we're going to be like, wait, maybe we don't need that anymore or something else. And then all that data is gone.
And I think it is important to not just put all of your eggs in one basket, right? If we rely too heavily on Slack and then it becomes something that it's not, that's the cost.
Especially when we see it again and again, right? It's always like, oh, this service is going away. Who knew? And like 10 years later, I think we can say we knew. Like even, it was,
even the pricing scare with cPanel that I feel like we had a couple of years ago at this point, where they increased their pricing, and we were kind of like, wow, we are focused a lot on cPanel. Maybe we should think on other things like Reclaim Cloud, and just diversify a little bit. But the Slack integrations are awesome. Even the when you see the announcements come into Discord from the Reclaim Roadshow bot, the announcements that are coming into sessions, those are all scheduled Slack messages that I've set up with Zapier through Slack to Discord. So I use Slack for everything. It's fun.
But this broader idea, and it took me years to wrap my head around this. And Tom, you less, and Lauren, you probably picked it up too. But like, I'm still working through it. Like, I remember when I first became an instructional technologist in 2005, I was like, what is RSS? How does it work? It doesn't make sense. Everything's infinitely reproducible. And like, it was like, for me, almost like trying to understand Nietzsche, right? Like, what's really happening? And the same thing happened with APIs and JSON and this idea of structured data that can be moved. And it's kind of how, Tom, you've worked with all sorts of things like ACH and now moving even the headless site we're running right now, it's pushing out to, but like that stuff to kind of start wrapping our heads around it and understanding how APIs and integration work. I think as technologists or whatever frame we work, even now as digital scholars, digital humanists, whatever, it's super important. It's another really important literacy that is hard, but tools like Zapier, Lauren, help you wrap your head around it. Obviously, if you can start writing the stuff like you, Tom, but that's another thing that I would like to see us focus more on is just those integrations. And we need folks to do that because obviously I don't still understand what it is.
Yeah, I've been working for a hosting company for 6 years. I've gone to so many sessions around the APIs, and I still can't, fully wrap my head around defining that. I know what it is in this cloudy sense over here, but I can't. If you ask me to write a sentence and define API, it's just I struggle with that still. And so for me, things like, tools like Zapier are really helpful because it does bring it down and sort of visualize it in a sense where it's like, okay, I need Slack to talk to Discord. I don't know how they're doing that on the back end, but I know that if I set this up right, they'll talk to each other. And that's what I need. We do the same thing with, Slack to WHMCS and vice versa. So we send notifications when certain orders come through or, based on client groups in WHMCS. So kind of bringing it back around the domain of one's own, there are ways that you can make the domain of one's own tools talk to things like Asana or Slack, which we use internally. So that's where I think Zapier is really, really helpful because otherwise I don't know how to write that stuff.
Well, and that's the thing. I think conceptually, it's more important to understand that you can set up a Rube Goldberg contraption or like, if this, then this happens, to know that things can talk to one another. That's what matters. The mechanism with which you make it, be it, traveling in time and going back to Yahoo Pipes, I used to do all sorts of crazy stuff just to not program. Like Jim and I, we did a whole presentation on non-programmistan, where we would just insist it. We would not program anything. And, that was my stance at the time. Now I can program and, it's a terrible thing that I've done. But, it's handy at times for when Zapier or whatever thing doesn't offer it. And also, like, after using if this then that, like, I don't like to have stuff in between me that might also later betray me. Lots of reasons to do it: simplicity, speed, not being able to program, but also it's cool if you don't have to.
Absolutely. No, thank you, Tom. In these last few minutes.
Yeah, thanks a lot for sharing that.
Yeah, thank you. In these next few minutes, we're coming up on the end of our hour here. So if anybody else wants to share, please jump in. In the meantime, I am going to point to our Domain of One's Own community site, or honestly, it's called our institution site. So that's probably it's not just Domain of One's Own. I'll be clear about that. But this is at reclaimhosting.com/institutions. You can go there now and see that. Some of you might already know this exists, but this is a great space if you are looking just to pop into other Domain of One's Own homepages or see other WordPress multi-site homepages. It's just a nice collection of school logos that have given us permission. I I think, to publicize their logo. So if not, if you see your logo and it shouldn't be up there, let us know and we'll take it off. But it's a great first step when you're trying to get examples for, how you might frame this on campus. And so from this page, I have found a couple that I want to share and that Jim and I can talk about here. And of course, this is sort of now going to lead into our live Q&A and just general closing for the next half hour. So that's kind of where this is headed. So if you also have any other questions that are not relevant to what we're talking about currently and just generally that have surfaced over the next 2 days, or last 2 days, I should say, let us know and we can address those now. But in the meantime, I know Jim and I wanted to highlight Coventry.domains. They are doing pretty incredible stuff where they have combined, they have a domain of one's own instance and they have a WordPress multi-site instance. And Coventry.domains started as their domain of one's own homepage, and they've now actually pulled it back into more of a landing page where they are framing out their services for students versus their educators. And then from there, you can either log into a WordPress multi-site, which I think is what they are pointing for folks towards now primarily, but they also have their domain of one's own instance, which you can also go to. So I'm pulling that up now. And again, they have such a cool setup here, really framed it out excellently for, again, students versus educators, framing out why we're here, what we're doing with domain of one's own, how it can be useful for students versus educators, how do I get an account? So it just really breaks it down for getting started. And then their support page is probably my favorite part. This is
amazing.
Coventry.domains/learn. Great search bar at the top, but then they kind of take the scariness out of why we're here. So instead of jumping straight into the tech, it starts with, why domains? How does the web work? How do we make a design for everyone? And they kind of takes you down best practices. So it's almost like these stepping stones for creating your space on the web and what that might look like, going through sourcing media, privacy and consent, all the way through leaving Coventry University at the end. So this is the great work, I think, of Lauren Haywood.
It is. She's amazing.
Noah, what's his last name? His name is escaping me, but the folks at Coventry are...
I will find it.
Thank you. Oh, that's bothering me so much. I'm sorry, Noah. But yes, their work is fantastic. I highly recommend.
Mitchell. Noah Mitchell.
Mitchell. Got it. Okay. And
one point, can I make a point about the Coventry Learn site?
Absolutely.
I think there's somewhere where she talks about domains and she uses a really interesting metaphor. So let's go there and look at it. I think it's like, why Coventry domains? And then, let's just see. And then let's setting up WordPress, introduction, installing, choosing your subdomain name. Doesn't she talk about the house?
She does. She has
where is it?
I mean, but she even starts here with a room of one's own with Virginia Woolf. So they really kind of take you back to what we're doing with domains.
If you're a new school or even an existing school and you're looking for a way to really provide see what they did, I think, at Coventry, and I think Lauren did it brilliantly, is she created an experience where you're going through and you're thinking about the affordances of the web and everything, rather than here's a tool, go. It's like, why are you here? What are you trying to accomplish? It kind of thinks about all those ideas of assessment, and it helped them, I think, distinguish between why use WordPress multi-site and why get someone up with a WordPress site quick and easy for a very focused thing versus what a domain is and why you would want to take that on. And I think that's a conversation worth having, right? Because some things can be accomplished quite well with a tool like WordPress multi-site. I mean, it's a great tool, but then domains would fit another possibility, I think, along the lines of what Tom was saying about the ability to mesh more, control more, and play more. So there is a balance there between one and the other. It's not an either or, which I always like, because I think the either or conversations gets us in the world of LMS or die. And for me, that's not the ed tech life I want to live. So yeah, Coventry Learn, check it out. It is an absolute gem of a site.
Really great. Next on my list that I wanted to share and just highlight, this is another really cool Domain of One's Own homepage. This is St. Norbert College, knight.domains. Again, they've kind of rebranded with this knight metaphor, and it's just dead simple with their sign up page. Quick sign up process for getting going. I think they've integrated with a ticketing system or something similar for support. It looks like Zendesk actually, which is what Reclaim Hosting uses for internal ticket troubleshooting. So I just like that they make it, again, really easy to access. They share community work, and they also have a tech bar as well. And I know that Taylor Jaden has worked with this to, I think, kind of offer support and resources for their community. So kind of cool. I love their work. They're worth checking out. That is at knight.domains, and this tech bar is at techbar.knight.domains.
Yeah, and Jaden has been great. He's also a great resource, as so many folks are in the Domain of One's Own community. And he also did some really cool stuff that inspired us early on with the Azuracast, which is an open source radio broadcasting tool. If any folks out there are doing radio, you can run it with a one-click installer on Reclaim Cloud. But he's a great example of moving and experimenting on all sorts. And Knight Domains is a reflection of that, I think.
Absolutely. The next one I like to point to, this is NYU Libraries. This is hosting.nyu.edu. On their tips and resources tab, as you scroll down, they have a great section on accessibility and even link to their digital accessibility checklist. And this is just a common question that I get as I'm onboarding new Domain of One's Own schools, is thinking about accessibility in Domain of One's Own, which is quite challenging because, at Reclaim Hosting, we're obviously offering access to these applications, but we ourselves aren't the owners of them. So our voice in how we can frame them and make them accessible for users, we only have so much power there. And so I think the work that we can do, and the work that I think Reclaim Hosting honestly could do a better job of doing, is, providing resources for things like this. And so, in the meantime, I think NYU's accessibility checklist is fantastic, and they link to it here. So
I mentioned NYU's just whole setup earlier, and NYU is a really interesting example of, understanding their identity as what we give you hosting. Like, what are you coming to us for? Hosting. Like, we're going to give you, it's very clear, and they understand. They even write, like you said, you pointed it out. It's like, what is hosting versus publishing? You need a publishing tool, something quick and easy. Go to WordPress multi-site or WordPress.com. If you need domains, this is what you're getting, and I love that.
Yeah, and you can see they're even talking about, okay, here's hosting, which obviously encompasses a larger set of skills or a suite of tools, whereas WordPress multi-site, is just that single dashboard. And I think that's a conversation that we have often, with Domain of One's Own admins and potential schools even, is, are these competing against each other? And I think the answer is no. There's a person out there that doesn't need cPanel, and just a simple WordPress dashboard is completely enough, and they don't want to manage their own plugins and themes. They just want to get up and running, and that's where multi-site is really helpful. Whereas Domain of One's Own, having that full cPanel with file manager and databases and full jet backup stuff, that's a whole set of other skills that can be very valuable if you need them.
Agreed. And I think the one thing there is it's a school by school basis. And I've had this discussion with many an admin or many a folk, like some WordPress multi-sites are more liberal, I would say, than others that are more locked down. And that would really depend upon what folks need to be able to do in order to use that or not. So your mileage will vary, but we hate to think of them as somehow in competition, because I don't think they are.
No, and in fact, there's so many we actually have quite a few domain of one's own schools that also have a larger WordPress multi-site instance with us. And they kind of like what Coventry did really elegantly is, they will kind of guide folks to different spaces depending on what they need. And I think that's where kind of the support happens on campus, is figuring out best use cases for what and defining that accordingly, and then pushing folks where they need to go. So this next one that I like to point to, this is domains.davidson.edu. Let me refresh my page, because I know sometimes so this subdomain here, you can see it kind of changing. I like pointing to this just because it sort of shows you the potential of what your subdomain could be. So some of our institutions, not all of them, will offer top level domains to users, but in most cases you are getting that free subdomain. And so knowing, the potential of that is kind of cool up front. So I just think that that's a cool animation that they use. And I think Oklahoma does something similar.
Yeah, I think Adam Kroom, who actually will be in Italy, I think, this next weekend, which is awesome. One of the early kind of pioneers of kind of bringing it to Oklahoma. He came up with these nice little animations where he would show all these different things. In fact, a lot of people, they also came up with the idea of a create, like they called it create, and they were the first folks to kind of say, let's get away from the domains terminology and let's create a space where folks really framing it well, like this is a place for folks to create and build all these different things. So I really love the way they imagined their project from the beginning.
Exactly. Next, I wanted to share, this is UNL, University of Nebraska-Lincoln. And they have a pretty standard setup here, or a standard homepage out of the box, but they did add this fine print to the bottom. So now we're kind of getting into more of the nitty gritty and just talking about policies that people set or that schools set, which of course is not something that Reclaim is going to do for you, but we will obviously help you enforce whatever policies that you do want to put in place. And so I think this one's interesting where they say, let me see if I can make this a bit bigger here for everyone. They say create UNL accounts are recycled following the end of every semester. Students and faculty are responsible for backing up and migrating their content prior to accounts being recycled. So that's not typically common. Usually domain of one's own accounts will stay around beyond a semester, but the school has just taken the strategy, okay, this is how we're keeping our stuff clean, and we get our users in there to explore, but it's really just to explore, and that's it. So
and that's another thing. It's like those are decisions you make up front, like how does this service want to work? And if it's a service associated with a series of classes where the intention is to get them familiar or have very specific tools they need to work with or HTML, and then clean them out so that the next class can come in, like that's another use. We have several schools who are using it along those lines. And, there's no one way to do domain of one's own. Right?
Absolutely. And to finish up here, I thought I'd highlight BYU Domains, their support, which I think is a wiki, and they've done a great job. They obviously are one of our largest domain of one's own schools, or I think the largest at this point, with something like 14 servers with us currently. So very big, and they have an entire team of folks that they have to support BYU Domains. And with that, I've always been fascinated with how they manage their support documentation to help their project scale to that extent. And so I'll share the link here in the chat, but I've just thought that this is a really cool example, that kind of takes them through, okay, what is BYU Domains? What's the purpose here? What are we doing? Our learning goals. And it, again, takes you through policy, which I think is important as well. So being really upfront about honor codes and all of that stuff, but then all the way down through, okay, helpful tips, security, functions of cPanel. I think they highlight WordPress, given that is a pretty popular application at this point, ways to troubleshoot, and then additional resources. And they have a lot of video resources, which I think is
they created like a library of videos, which are quite useful.
Yeah, and they do stay fairly up to date, but I've always I'll link out to these for our own internal tickets sometimes. Like it's
Yep.
just, they have a really cool set of videos. So definitely worth checking out if that's of interest to you all.
Wow, that was a tour de force. And I want to thank Ed, Lee, Marie, Tom, Tim for jumping on and sharing with us. We were hoping that people would be bold and would step up. And as always, you have. Actually, folks have throughout this 2-day workshop. I just want to, we always go into these things with a certain amount of trepidation because we're experimenting with a new platform. We're hoping Discord was as good as it was for OER by Domains. And I think it's only as good as the people there, and you all have come and shared and, engaged, and we appreciate that. But we did, Lauren, am I right, set aside some time now for some Q&A. Is that right? The last 15 minutes?
That's right. We have about 15 minutes left. So we'll kind of hang out and watch the chat here. If there's anything else that you want us to tackle right now or to address, let us know, big or small. In the meantime, I did receive a message that I wanted, let me see. Oh, no, that was for something else. So no, I don't have any questions. So yes, if there is anything that we can help or discuss, please let us know. We also have an internal Google Doc for Gemini and for our team that we have been kind of updating as the conversation has sort of blossomed over the last 2 days with things that we can help with. So I'm really interested to know how the breakout discussions went today. And I know that there was that final question, what can Reclaim Hosting do to better support you in these endeavors? If there's anything where, it was this very sort of group consensus, like, why isn't Reclaim Hosting on that? Let us know.
No pitchforks, though.
Please don't be mad at us, but let us help you. So please let us know. Let's see. Such a great resource for learning from others. Yes, I agree, Carla. But yes, if there's anything else we can do, please let us know. And while we're waiting on people to write in the chat, I'll link out to, or not link, but just sort of highlight one of the announcements that just went out in the announcements channel. We have created a feedback form, which I know everybody sort of rolls their eyes at the end of each event, but we would be really grateful if you would take a minute or two. I think it's like 3 questions. It's very simple, but we just kind of want to get a sense of how this virtual event worked for you. We've been really open about the fact that it's a bit of an experiment right now. It's not perfect, but we are constantly tweaking and trying to make things better. So
I am interested, I have to say, I am interested in how folks found the video setup with the embedded Discord, as well as with using Discord, because there is some distinctions between the two. But how does that work? That's something we're working with Michael Branson Smith and Tom Woodward on trying to kind of use, and I know all will be using it for other events. And so rather than spending too much time, how has that kind of flow worked? And, don't feel free to be on the spot, just be honest. If it didn't work, we want to know, because we'll spare the next group. So definitely let us know.
It looks like Tom put this in the chat. I'd like a more searchable list of domain of one's own schools with some additional data to help connect people. I love that idea.
Yeah, and this is something, I don't know, Tom, if you remember, or anyone else, but WordPress did this really well. WordPress.org they had a showcase. And they put stuff in, and I remember UMW Blogs was part of that showcase, which I was like, this is awesome. But people could add stuff, and then the showcase had data about it and a link. And we had talked for years now about getting something of a showcase together for Domain of One's Own. And again, that's on us, and that's something we need to do. And I think the thing is this event has been great for me. I don't know how it's been for you, but it was great for me in that, to see all these people who have all this cool stuff to share and are doing all this stuff. Sometimes when we're just, making the donuts and doing support and stuff like that, we miss it. So these events are important for us to connect, and then also inspiration to bring some of that together. And the easiest way is to have people kind of contribute that. But I think we need to build something in order to do it easy, like maybe a Splot or maybe ACH or.
And I mean, I have a few test sites that I have started, over the years, and I even have domains that are sort of set aside for that project. It is very much on our radar. It's just, even when you think about showcasing someone's work or putting someone's information out there, it does get hairy quickly, because you want to ask for permission and make sure that data that you're sharing is sort of approved. And that is a longer process when we're talking about schools that are constantly having, getting domain of one's own and then trying to get onboarded. And it's a project for sure, but definitely one that we're thinking through.
And Tom made a good point. Like, is there some way to make it an opt-in possibility? Like, when you get your domain of one's own, can I opt into the, general, what we call directory of searchable sites? And then the school makes that choice, and we're not pushing them forward. And like you said, even with the insignias, like, we don't want to put someone's, thing up and then find out we can't use that legally.
Well, and to be fair, I made that joke, but we go through that usually with contracts where we have to sign something saying that we can't share logos or something like that. So I think we've got it, but there's obviously some schools that might have been grandfathered in beforehand. But I like the idea of asking folks.
Exactly. But it's an idea of permissions, right? And respect. That's really good.
Let's see what else. Pressbooks directory.
Yeah, I would interesting. Erica brings up the point of more hands-on workshops. And what I would be interested from folks who are still just holding on before they leave, and we know that, like, of all the things you talked about, like, would you want to see a hands-on workshop on like archiving? Like, I know, Erica, a lot of people are in your support voice channel. Like, is that what we want to kind of focus in on? Like, a lot of times, like, we go a little bit in the dark, not always knowing what people want us to focus on. Like, I really enjoyed talking about assessment in the voice channels today. So knowing what folks maybe want, and I guess they vote with their feet more than anything else, would be interesting. So that might be something, if you can share it with us in the feedback, like, if you wanted a more deep dive into something, what would it be?
Yeah, and this next comment that I've put up here as a banner is from Janet. I'm not going to attempt your last name. I'm so sorry. But this is
Swatsjano, I want to say.
Okay,
but I just messed it up for you. So sorry.
But yes, we have been doing, or I should say, semi-regular meetings. Chris Alterich has been great for helping us do these domain of one's own meetups. And we try to do them once a month. So I will say it does, it's more like once a quarter, maybe. But I agree with this. I think anytime that we can just kind of jump in and, chat for an hour and say, hey, how's it going? Are people struggling with something, or what are people doing around with the latest WordPress upgrade, or, just kind of being able to come together about things that have happened recently. So I agree.
And I think Dave Wilson gave us a great kind of opener. Like, we can have a hands-on workshop around Reclaim Cloud. And I think I want to, ideally, and, again, what you want and what you have is two different things. Is like, if we keep this Discord going and we reach out to admins and let them know, and then we just come back here for those workshops and we use a similar method, I think the infrastructure is there. People know what to expect, and then they come if they can. And then that's something that's not a paid event. That is just a workshop with a focus thing where people who are interested come as they see fit. It hopefully won't be 2 days. It will be more focused, an hour of your day, just to get an overview so you can go back to your faculty, staff, and students and say, this is what's possible with Domain. So I love that idea, Dave, and we can make that happen. And I think always just a focused, simple, pragmatic goal is better than dreams and say, I wish we could build this or that. Like, we can do that, and we will.
Absolutely. And I think, it's a feat in and of itself to get everyone into Discord. So I want to keep this around. I think it could be helpful, the fact that everybody's already in here, the channels are already up and running. And so continue to use it. I don't have any plans to get rid of it.
I think Ed Beck's point too about the domain of one's own. No, yeah, like I mean, I love the indie web. Don't get me wrong. Like it's kind of what we came up with, but sometimes like you don't want to replace Instagram, right, with a build it your own. Like you kind of want something that's a little bit more digestible. And so I think that's fair. And I think we'll try and find that balance. So good point.
All right. Oh yeah. Is there any way to sign up to get notices about future meetups?
Yeah.
Yes. So I have a mailing list for all Domain of One's Own admins. If you are a new school or a potential school, there's a chance that you're not on that list yet. So I will make sure that happens. But usually when a school is onboarded with Reclaim Hosting and getting Domain of One's Own, I add them to that list. And so they then receive all future emails where, you know, I try to do one at least once a semester. I don't want to bombard folks, but I also think it's important to share updates of things that are happening at Reclaim, whether that's anything like a PHP version upgrade to applications that we're working on, or updates in Reclaim Cloud, upcoming events. So that is something that we try to stay on top of. But yes, please, if you have any feedback about how you receive those notifications or how you take in that content, just let us know.
Yeah, and I'm glad to hear from Janet that my pronunciation was good. She's just being nice, but thank you, Janet.
And I will say, just to kind of talk about future meetups, Jim and I we've started talking maybe briefly about some sort of Domain of One's Own workshop in the fall that's might be focused more on libraries.
That's right.
So that's something that we're kind of thinking about now in just sort of this fall-ish timeline. That's all we've really planned so far.
Yeah.
But if
It's
that's
almost,
different,
I'd be interested to see if people, because we've had so much interest from libraries and so many new schools coming on. And I know that a library is a catch-all for a lot of things, ed tech groups, digital humanities groups. So that could still be all of you. Like it could just be, it's living in the library. But like, I kind of want to, I get afraid, Lauren, and I don't know if you feel the same way, that we're ignoring like, because we come out of an ed tech group that wasn't associated, or I come out of an ed tech group that wasn't associated with a library. But so I don't want to focus too much on one part. Like another thing is IT groups. So we want to try and represent the full spectrum of folks. So maybe looking at folks in the library and hearing more about how and why would be fun. So stay tuned.
As we're kind of starting to be able to travel again slowly, and maybe not this fall, but into next spring, I want to start coming back and doing physical road shows again, and coming on the road and, doing more focused in-person trainings. And those tend to be a bit more intimate and more focused specifically at a specific campus about specific needs. And those, are also just as fun and rewarding for us as well. So there's always, our problem has never been lack of ideas. It's just having the time to do them all. So, but I guess as we're wrapping up now, just again, such a huge thanks to everyone who has come out and has participated in any form or fashion. We can't tell you what it means to us. It's been very helpful. I think for me, I don't want to speak for you, Jim, but just to hear from folks about their experiences. Again, it's like we're sort of this remote company and we're not on campus. And so it's nice to hear, that our resources are helpful, and if they're not helpful, what we can do to make them helpful. And it's just been an awesome 2 days. So thank you.
It is. And I still, every time I come to these, you think you've seen it all. And then there's swaths of cool stuff people are doing that you had no idea. Like Marie just pulling out that site today. It's like, what? And, to hear about the Data Sitters Club and Tom's work with Slack to push stuff out rather than in, like, there's so much cool stuff and so many great people doing that. I hope for those of you who are new to Domain of One's Own, maybe you got some inspiration and you have something to go back to. Maybe as a result of this workshop, you have more questions for us. Please reach out. Like, I think that's the point of it. Like, this is our way of trying to connect with the community, but even more importantly, trying to connect the community so that you all can kind of, get a sense beyond us and what we're kind of providing to see how it's working on the ground. So really a huge thanks to all the people who came and really like, you didn't just come, you didn't just show up, like you brought it and you engaged and you made it what it was. So thank you so much. We did it again, Lauren. We did it again. We did it again. We did it again. We did it again. We did it.
I muted him. I'm just kidding. But yes, thank you all so much. Okay.
Oh, wait. I thought I was muted.
No, I unmuted you to be polite. Okay. Well, anyway, thank you all. We'll stick around in Discord for a little longer in case anything else comes up. Otherwise, have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you on the web. Yeah.